Just 1 minute ago, shocking reports leaked from inside Buckingham Palace and Westminster. King Charles has clashed head-on with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and the fallout is already shaking British politics to its core. Palace sources are calling this confrontation one of the most dangerous moments for the monarchy in decades. The king is said to be furious, and what happened behind closed doors could permanently damage the delicate balance of power between Crown and government. If this continues, it won't just be a scandal. It could trigger a full-blown constitutional crisis. Here's what we know so far. According to Palace insiders, the breaking point came during a heated exchange over Keir Starmer's controversial handling of Donald Trump's upcoming state visit. Just weeks ago, Starmer blindsided Buckingham Palace by publicly handing Trump what he claimed was a sealed invitation from King Charles himself. That move, which played out in front of cameras at the Oval Office, was already described by royal advisers as a reckless breach of centuries-old protocol. But now the King's private reaction has finally been revealed, and it's worse than anyone imagined. Multiple senior aides, speaking under strict anonymity, say Charles confronted Starmer directly in what one source called a rare and uncomfortable meeting at the palace. The king, who is usually cautious and diplomatic, reportedly told the Prime Minister that his actions placed the monarchy in an impossible position, forcing the Crown to appear as though it endorsed Trump's aggressive threats against Canada. For Charles, this is not just politics. It's personal. He is not only the King of the United Kingdom, but also the head of state for Canada, and Trump's recent comments about making Canada the 51st US state hit at the very heart of the Commonwealth. To suddenly host Trump in London with golden carriages and state banquets would make the monarchy look complicit in undermining Canadian sovereignty. But Starmer refused to back down. Palace officials described the meeting as tense, with the Prime Minister insisting that the invitation had already been extended and could not be withdrawn without causing a diplomatic disaster with Washington. One insider said Starmer framed the issue as a matter of national interest, arguing that Britain's relationship with America was too important to risk. The king, however, saw it differently. He warned Starmer that forcing a state visit on such short notice was reckless, disrespectful, and potentially destabilising for the Commonwealth. According to one source, Charles reminded the Prime Minister that the monarchy must remain neutral and that dragging the Crown into political stunts could have consequences far beyond a single visit. What makes this clash so extraordinary is that these kinds of conversations almost never leak. By tradition, discussions between the monarch and the Prime Minister remain private and tightly guarded. The fact that details are spilling out now suggests a deep breakdown in trust, not only between Charles and Starmer, but also within the palace itself. Royal aides, usually loyal to the grave, are so alarmed by what's happening that they've chosen to speak out. They describe a sense of shock, even fear, that Starmer has crossed a line no modern Prime Minister dared to touch. One palace insider put it bluntly, this isn't just about protocol, it's about respect. The Prime Minister has treated the king like a political prop, and the Crown will not forget it. The stakes couldn't be higher. In Britain's unwritten constitution, the monarchy and the government are supposed to work hand in hand, presenting a united front. The king doesn't interfere with policy, and the Prime Minister doesn't exploit the monarch for partisan gain. That balance has held for centuries. Now, with Starmer's gamble on Trump, that balance is under threat. Constitutional experts are already warning that this clash could have ripple effects across the entire system, from Downing Street to the Commonwealth to Britain's standing on the world stage. The very foundations of British politics are trembling, and insiders say this is only the beginning. The confrontation between King Charles and Keir Starmer didn't end with that tense meeting inside Buckingham Palace. In fact, insiders say it set off a chain reaction that is now rattling the foundations of British politics. Just hours after the clash, senior palace aides began holding emergency discussions with constitutional advisers at Balmoral, quietly mapping out the King's options. One source described the mood as grim, noting that Charles feels boxed in by Starmer's reckless move. The problem is not only Trump's looming visit, but also the perception that the Prime Minister has hijacked royal authority for political gain. That, according to advisers, is a red line. It's one thing for politicians to stumble or miscalculate, but using the monarchy as a prop is considered a betrayal of trust that strikes at the heart of Britain's unwritten constitution. Palace insiders reveal that the king is furious not simply because of Trump, but because of the precedent Starmer has now set. For centuries, royal invitations have been handled quietly, with precision and careful diplomacy. Each step is calibrated to maintain neutrality, to preserve the dignity of the crown, and to protect Britain's long-term relationships with its allies. By turning the invitation into a public spectacle, complete with cameras rolling in the Oval Office, Starmer tore up that playbook in seconds. To Charles, this wasn't a bold diplomatic move, it was a humiliation. He has been left looking like he endorses a president who openly threatens Commonwealth sovereignty. Even worse, Charles has been painted into a corner. If he goes ahead with the state visit, he appears to back Trump's aggressive rhetoric toward Canada. If he cancels or delays, he risks plunging Britain into an international incident with Washington. Either way, it is the monarchy that pays the price for Starmer's stunt. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. Constitutional experts warn that Starmer may have underestimated the silent power of the monarchy. Unlike politicians, the king never has to say a word in public to send a message. His silence itself is a weapon. Already, royal watchers are pointing out that Charles has gone unusually quiet. No public appearances alongside Starmer, no joint statements, no reassuring smiles for the cameras. Instead, the palace has gone into what insiders describe as cold storage mode. Communications with Downing Street are now strictly formal, with every word weighed and documented. This is the monarchy's way of signalling deep disapproval, a diplomatic freeze-out that few prime ministers can survive for long. Meanwhile, the political fallout is spreading like wildfire. Within Westminster, whispers of discontent are growing louder. Senior Labour MPs are reportedly alarmed by Starmer's decision to provoke the palace at such a delicate time. One shadow minister, speaking off the record, warned, "You don't mess with the monarchy." It's political suicide. Even some of Starmer's closest allies are questioning his judgment, asking why he risked a constitutional firestorm for the sake of a few flattering headlines in Washington. Across the aisle, Conservative leaders smell blood. They're seizing on the clash as proof that Starmer lacks the diplomatic finesse to lead Britain on the world stage. Former ministers have already branded the move amateur hour diplomacy, while backbenchers are whispering about whether the Prime Minister has fatally damaged his standing with the Crown. But perhaps the most worrying sign for Starmer is the international reaction. In Canada, officials are said to be privately horrified at the prospect of a lavish Trump state visit hosted by a monarch who is also their head of state. To them, the optics are devastating. How can the King of Canada honour a president who threatens to absorb their nation? In Australia, leaders are also watching closely, with subtle comments about the importance of protecting Commonwealth sovereignty already surfacing in the press. The message is clear. Starmer's gamble has not only upset the palace, it has rattled the entire Commonwealth. If this rift deepens, it could weaken Britain's influence across dozens of nations that still look to the Crown as a symbol of unity and stability. Behind closed doors, Starmer is said to be doubling down. Rather than apologise or seek compromise, he is reportedly pushing ahead with preparations for Trump's September visit, determined to frame it as a diplomatic triumph. But palace sources say the king is digging in as well, determined to protect the monarchy's neutrality at all costs. What happens next is anyone's guess, but one thing is certain. Britain now faces a standoff between Crown and government, unlike anything seen in modern history, and the clock is ticking. The state visit is only weeks away, and with every passing day, the stakes grow higher. Will Charles bend to Starmer's will, or will the monarch quietly but firmly assert his own authority? The answer could reshape British politics for a generation. What makes this situation even more explosive is that it is no longer just a palace versus government dispute. It is fast becoming a constitutional crisis that experts warn could destabilise the United Kingdom itself. Normally, the monarch and the Prime Minister present a seamless partnership, a united front that reassures both the public and Britain's allies. But now, that image has shattered. Instead, we are seeing open leaks, behind-the-scenes anger, and a public sense that something is deeply wrong at the very top of the British state. The last time tensions of this scale emerged between the Crown and government was in the 1930s during the abdication crisis. Back then, it was a king's personal choices that shook the monarchy. Today, it is the Prime Minister's political gambit that has dragged the Crown into dangerous waters. Insiders say the king's advisers are weighing the unthinkable, whether to quietly push back against Starmer through indirect means. While Charles cannot openly defy the elected government, he has tools that are subtle but devastating. By withholding the warmth of his public support, by slowing down cooperation on key government initiatives, or by quietly signalling disapproval to foreign leaders, the king can send ripples that undermine a prime minister's authority without ever speaking a single word. Already, signs of this strategy are emerging. Foreign diplomats report that palace staff have been unusually cautious in recent meetings, making clear that the king's role in Trump's visit is still under discussion. Translation: the palace is deliberately creating uncertainty, leaving Starmer exposed on the international stage. One senior diplomat even described Britain as two governments at once, and Downing Street pushing one way, Buckingham Palace resisting the other. The British public, meanwhile, is watching this drama unfold with growing unease. Social media has erupted with furious debate. Hashtags criticising Starmer's handling of the monarchy have been trending, with thousands accusing him of humiliating the crown and playing games with the constitution. Others, however, argue that Starmer is simply being bold, seizing opportunities that timid leaders before him avoided. Yet even among his supporters, there is concern that he has overstepped. Pollsters are already warning that Starmer's approval ratings could take a major hit if the perception grows that he had disrespected the king. And remember, in Britain, the monarchy is consistently more popular than any politician. To appear to be at war with the king is political quicksand. The international press is picking up on the story as well, amplifying the sense of crisis. American outlets have portrayed Starmer as desperate to cozy up to Trump, even at the expense of his own monarchy. Canadian media has been scathing, accusing Britain of ignoring Canada's sovereignty for political theatre. Australian commentators have raised pointed questions about whether the Commonwealth can survive if its head of state is seen bending to American pressure. Each headline, each broadcast is another blow to Britain's reputation as a nation of calm, stable diplomacy. Instead, the world sees chaos, a kingdom divided against itself. Back inside Buckingham Palace, the king is reportedly spending long hours in consultation with his constitutional advisors. Sources describe him as calm but deeply concerned, determined not to let the monarchy be dragged further into partisan conflict. Yet even Charles's legendary patience has limits. One insider warned that the king has a long memory and this breach will not be forgotten. That is a chilling thought for Starmer. Even if he survives the immediate crisis, he may have permanently damaged his relationship with the monarchy, a relationship every prime minister relies on for smooth governance. Once trust is broken at that level, it is rarely restored. The most chilling part, experts now warn that Starmer may have triggered something he cannot control. By forcing the king into a corner, he risks awakening debates that Britain has long kept dormant about the true role of the monarchy, about the limits of prime ministerial power, and about whether the unwritten constitution can withstand such stress. For decades, these questions have been theoretical, tucked away in academic journals. Now they are suddenly real. One constitutional scholar put it bluntly: when the palace and Downing Street are at odds, the entire system trembles. If this escalates, it could shake the United Kingdom to its very core. As the September deadline for Trump's visit draws closer, the sense of panic behind the scenes is reaching fever pitch. According to insiders, Buckingham Palace and Downing Street are now operating on entirely different tracks, with each side quietly preparing for outcomes that could clash in disastrous fashion. Palace staff are reportedly drafting multiple contingency plans, ranging from a scaled-down working visit with limited public appearances to an outright postponement of the state banquet and ceremonial carriage ride. Meanwhile, Starmer's team is said to be working overtime with American officials, promising the full royal treatment in order to secure what they believe will be a diplomatic victory. This tug of war has created a surreal situation, two versions of the same event being planned in parallel, with no guarantee of which one will actually unfold. Diplomatic circles are alarmed. Career ambassadors who have spent decades cultivating Britain's reputation for quiet sophistication and smooth protocol are horrified by the public mess now spilling into headlines. One Washington-based diplomat reportedly described the current state of affairs as chaos in slow motion, warning that the credibility of Britain's statecraft is evaporating with every new leak. Across Europe, foreign officials are whispering that the United Kingdom has lost its touch, that it no longer knows how to manage its most precious asset, the monarchy. In the words of one EU envoy, Britain's monarchy was supposed to be its greatest soft power weapon. Now it looks like a liability. And make no mistake, the palace knows exactly what is at stake. For centuries, the royal family has been carefully shielded from political storms, preserving their image as neutral arbiters above the fray. That image is what allows them to open doors no politician can. It's what gives them influence in the Commonwealth, respect in Washington, and quiet sway in capitals from Delhi to Canberra. Starmer's gamble has put all of that at risk. By dragging the king into a public spat over Trump, he has turned royal diplomacy into a political football. Sources inside Buckingham Palace are describing this as a worst-case scenario, a dangerous precedent that could erode the monarchy's standing, not only in Britain, but around the world. Meanwhile, the king himself has remained deliberately silent, a move that royal historians say is anything but passive. Charles has not defended the Prime Minister. He has not appeared alongside him. He has not even offered the faintest public nod of support. Instead, he has retreated to Balmoral, holding a series of private meetings with senior advisors and constitutional lawyers. According to one historian, this silence is the monarchy's most powerful weapon, the royal equivalent of a Cold War. By withholding his presence, by refusing to play the public role expected of him, Charles is sending a signal so loud that every politician in Westminster has heard it. Trust has been broken and the palace is not on the Prime Minister's side. That message is now rippling across the entire British establishment. Civil servants are reportedly uneasy, with some departments slowing cooperation on Starmer's flagship policies, quietly waiting to see how the palace dispute unfolds. Military figures, too, are said to be nervous, privately questioning whether the Prime Minister's judgment can be trusted when he is openly at odds with the king. Even within Starmer's own party, whispers of rebellion are growing louder. Senior Labour MPs are telling journalists that they fear the Prime Minister has overreached, using the monarchy as a pawn in his short-term political game. One veteran Labour voice warned, "This is dangerous territory, both day. Once you break the bond with the Crown, you don't just risk a political defeat. You risk destabilising the whole system." And looming over all of this is the figure of Donald Trump himself, apparently oblivious to the constitutional nightmare his visit has unleashed. Sources close to Trump describe him as thrilled at the prospect of a full royal welcome, boasting to allies that he will ride in the golden carriage and dine at Buckingham Palace. For the palace, these boasts are a nightmare. How do you script a state banquet speech for a man who has openly threatened to annex Canada, a nation over which the king himself rules? How do you choreograph pomp and ceremony for a leader whose presence alone divides the Commonwealth? These are questions royal advisors admit they have no precedent for, no manual, no roadmap, no safe solution. The more they try to prepare, the more impossible it seems. Every day that passes brings Britain closer to a moment of reckoning. Will Charles swallow his fury and play host to Trump as if nothing has happened, sacrificing dignity to preserve diplomatic calm? Or will he find a way to resist, to slow down, to quietly sabotage the spectacle Starmer has promised? Either path is dangerous. Either path carries risks that could scar the monarchy for years to come. And all the while, the eyes of the world are watching, waiting to see whether the United Kingdom can withstand the storm its own Prime Minister has unleashed. The stage is now set for what could be one of the most dramatic political showdowns in modern British history. Every insider, every commentator, every diplomat agrees on one thing. The relationship between King Charles and Keir Starmer has been damaged in ways that may never fully heal. And as the September visit approaches, the country is heading toward a breaking point. The question is no longer whether there has been a clash. It is how far that clash will go and what consequences it will unleash. Behind palace gates, advisors are working through nightmare scenarios. What if Trump arrives in London while still threatening Canada? What if protests erupt across the Commonwealth, accusing the king of bowing to American pressure? What if Charles, in a desperate bid to protect his dignity, decides to cancel or scale back the visit at the last minute? Any one of these outcomes could trigger chaos. A cancellation would embarrass Britain on the global stage and infuriate Washington. A scaled-down visit would send a message of royal defiance, driving a wedge between palace and government. And going ahead with the full state spectacle would alienate Canada and other Commonwealth nations, shaking their trust in the crown. In every direction lies danger. There is no safe path left. For Starmer, the gamble is even greater. If the visit collapses, he will be blamed for reckless diplomacy, accused of humiliating both Britain and the monarchy. If it goes ahead, he may win short-term praise for securing Trump's favour, but at the cost of permanently souring his relationship with the king. And in Britain, history shows that no prime minister can survive long without the quiet cooperation of the palace. The monarchy may be ceremonial in theory, but in practice it is a silent pillar of the entire system. Lose its trust, and everything from diplomacy to domestic policy becomes harder. Civil servants drag their feet. Diplomats hedge their bets. Allies abroad grow cautious. Opposition leaders grow bold. The machinery of government slows to a crawl. Starmer may soon discover that angering the crown is like soaring at the foundations of his own house. The wider establishment is already bracing for fallout. Within Westminster, whispers of discontent are turning into open talk of political miscalculation. Some Labour MPs fear this will be remembered as the moment their leader crossed a line that should never have been touched. Conservative critics are circling like sharks, portraying Starmer as reckless, naive and unfit for high office. And constitutional scholars are warning that this crisis could reopen old debates about the monarchy itself. For years, Republicans have argued that the crown is outdated and unnecessary. Now, with the monarchy dragged into partisan controversy, those voices are gaining new ammunition. Could Starmer's stunt inadvertently fuel a movement to weaken or even dismantle the monarchy? That is a question no one expected to be asking in 2025, but it is now on the table. Through it all, King Charles remains silent. No fiery speeches, no leaks from his own lips, no dramatic gestures, just silence. A silence so heavy it feels like thunder. To the untrained eye, it may look like retreat, but to those who know the ways of the monarchy, it is a weapon sharper than any sword. Every day that passes without royal support, every event the king declines to attend, every frosty silence between palace and government, it is a message that Starmer cannot ignore. The king's silence is not weakness.